Hi, Savannah.
What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about Thomas Kinkade Studios' rendition of The Mandalorian.
So, I think before we get started, we just want to note that while we will be discussing The Mandalorian, we are not going to be talking about too many spoilers, especially since somebody here has not seen all of The Mandalorian yet. But also, just in general, we're going to be using these paintings as more of a case study looking at pop culture represented in art and things like collaborations between Disney and other artists. So, yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this.
Yeah, I also want it to be noted that, I like Star Wars. I grew up with Star Wars. Who hasn't? But it's kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean for me, or other kind of high concept movies where I kind of just watch them and I'm not quite 100% sure what's going on all the time. So please forgive me and Savannah if we say something that is incorrect.
Yeah, definitely, we are by no means Star Wars experts. We do not know all of the lore or all of the background information of every single ancillary character within the show. So, just to get that out there.
Thank you for your forgiveness in advance.
Yes, thank you. Before we get into talking about anything related really to The Mandalorian or Star Wars, I figured we'd do a little bit of background on Thomas Kinkade and who he is as a artist, or who he was as an artist. He was an American painter. He died just somewhat recently in 2012. He's known for painting really like idyllic landscapes, things like cottages, images of Main Street America, Christmas, sometimes religious scenes, definitely religious symbols and elements are very often seen throughout a lot of his paintings. He's known for making really like mass marketed paintings that are then represented in like prints that people have, puzzles, posters, like you name it. There's probably something Thomas Kinkade that you can buy with one of his images on it. He considered himself to be a painter of light. That's a term that he actually trademarked to refer to himself, even though another artist in the 1800s had also referred to himself as that before. He's drawn criticism for some of his behavior and business practices that he had, and a lot of people consider his artwork to be kitsch. Kitsch meaning something that is like, my example that I always think of with kitsch is like those paintings that had like the dogs all playing poker together. That, you know what I'm talking about? It's like that kind of imagery that somebody has that's maybe like cheesy or tacky, something like that they might have in their home. Because of that, he's never really been like revered or liked or accepted by the contemporary art world. And he died of intoxication, it seems like, of mixing alcohol and medications together, and he was a known alcoholic. I'd love, Ryan, to hear a little bit about your associations with Thomas Kinkade.
I happen to have a friend who is a fan of Thomas Kinkade Studios' Disney puzzles. So I have done quite a few of those. And, like, you do them and you're like, this is a little garish, but, like, I don't know, like, it's kind of like the idyllic cottages, like the pretty flowers, some of the lighting, like, it kind of goes well. I did one of the Tangled ones, and it had, like, the beautiful lanterns, and it looked kind of nice, actually. But, like, you kind of do more and more of them, and, I don't know, they're all kind of the same. You kind of get bored of the cottages and the rivers and lakes and streams and water imagery, and like you kind of get this like sinking suspicion that like, man, this Thomas Kinkade dude, I don't know what's up with him. And I didn't know what was up with him. I had no idea until recently, when I was like, he is a bad person. You know what I mean? Like, you have that like feeling in your stomach. You're like, I don't know if this guy's good. And he wasn't. And I was pretty happy about that, to have that confirmed in my mind. But that's just kind of in general. He's just been like, I know him for his Disney stuff. That's about it.
I think I'm pretty much the same. Like, if I were to think about maybe wherever it was that I first saw anything Thomas Kinkade, I would think of like a dentist office maybe, or maybe like that one friend whose family is like really into Disney and they have like annual passes and they go every year or something like that. They might have like a picture or something Thomas Kinkade in their house. And I think I really think about like the store, like usually I think every Disney park that I've ever been to, meaning California parks and Florida parks, they have a Thomas Kinkade Studios store somewhere or some type of retail establishment at the parks that sell different like little sculptures and tchotchkes, paintings, what have you, of all different imagery from the Disney movies. So that's really what I think about him. He's kind of like a running joke within the art community. Like I kind of mentioned in our last podcast, I studied art history in my undergrad, and he's not like somebody that you learn about in school. Like he's somebody that is like people make jokes about pretty much, and nobody is ever taken seriously in that
which was honestly
capacity.
kind of strange to me considering his fame and I mean impact, right? I mean, like I know he has self-proclaimed fame, but he does have real actual success despite the bankruptcy of several of his stores. But that's still so many avid collectors, and I don't know, it's very odd to me that he's kind of pushed under the rug in the art community when it's I think good to examine failures in the community and why they're not considered real artists, you know, like what makes him not considered that way.
Definitely. I especially think if you were specifically trying to learn about business practices within the art world, like he would definitely be somebody I think worth studying and you could learn a lot from, or just even in the gallery space. So definitely a lot of interesting things to unpack there about the art world and Thomas Kinkade.
In case everyone here maybe is a first-time listener, Savanah, what's your background with art again?
Yes, so like I just said, I studied art history in my undergrad and also art when I got my master's degree. And within like the past couple years, I've been working mostly like in the gallery space, but also a little bit in the museum space within the contemporary art world. So I'm somewhat involved, or I guess you could say involved, with the art community.
I know, it's like the thing now, right? We can't downplay ourselves. We have to make ourselves proud of what we are. If we are artists, if we are writers, we need to proclaim that loud and proud. Right, Savanah?
Yes, no matter what our actual contributions are in those spaces. And I think, Ryan, you wanted to touch a little bit about this painter of light term that Kinkade trademarked for himself.
Yeah, so painter of light, meaning like what? Painter of God, painter of holiness. Just that kind of phrase really struck me, and I didn't know it was previously used by someone. I mean, of course it would be, right? It sounds kind of like, I don't know, something I would read in a fantasy novel. In fact, I just finished playing a video game where there was like a main cult leader artist in Danganronpa V3, and her like quirk was that she was the ultimate artist and that a god moved her hand and she was like a leader of a cult. So that's what it instantly reminded me of when I saw that title, and like Thomas Kinkade like gave himself that title, right? Are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to give yourself titles?
I think that's probably a pretty standard thing for artists to do, especially male artists. So I'm not surprised. I'm also not even surprised that he would be taking it from somebody else. I'm also not surprised that he found it important to trademark that for himself as well. So I definitely I can see probably his thought process, and probably I would think it all came down to some level of marketing, since he did definitely market himself to religious Christian communities to try to sell his artwork and really try to play that up. And so I think it all probably just came down to ooh, this is something that we can add as a tagline when we're trying to push his artwork on people.
And I know we keep saying that Thomas Kinkade is a bad person, or at least I do, and it is because of his business practices in the art community, as well as I think several instances of sexual assault in the media, and him famously urinating on a Winne the Pooh statue stating, "This one's for you, Walt." So it's not baseless, and it's not just because of his Christian views.
Which is also kind of funny because it's like, on the one hand, you would think that maybe those things are the reason why he's been ostracized by the art world, but actually I think that's pretty common practice. Like all those things that he did for other like major male artists in the industry. Now that we've kind of gotten all that background about Thomas Kinkade out of the way, I think we'll do like just like a little bit of background on The Mandalorian. Again, we're just doing these paintings as more of a case study, but we are going to be talking about The Mandalorian, which is a TV series on Disney Plus that was created by Jon Favreau. It came out in 2019. The first live action TV series in the Star Wars franchise ever. The series stars Pedro Pascal. He is Din Djarin, and he is a Mandalorian. He's a bounty hunter who was tasked with retrieving the child, aka Grogu, who we learn his name later. He's tasked to retrieve him, and then he ends up kind of taking care of this child and trying to return him to his rightful home. So kind of like we said before, we're definitely not experts by any means. Me personally, I've always really enjoyed the Star Wars series. Ever since I was a kid, I really liked The Mandalorian. Honestly, I think The Mandalorian is probably my favorite Star Wars thing that has come out within, I don't know, at least like the past 10 years. Probably. I really enjoy the series and movies. I think they were probably like my favorite movies when I was like 5, but somewhere in between like 5 years old and, I don't know, high school, it kind of all got lost and I wasn't too into Star Wars during those times, but I definitely like have an appreciation for it as a franchise and what it's done like pop culturally and just culturally as well.
I started The Mandalorian this year. I got to about episode 3, and in my defense, I was watching it just after I had surgery, and I was having a tough time staying awake watching it, and I'm not sure. It just didn't immediately stick with me. It didn't jive with me. I liked the way it looked visually. I really like Pedro Pascal, so I really wanted to watch it and like it. I've never been a fan of Baby Yoda too much, so that wasn't really a driving force for me. We both kind of grew up in the same way, in the same household sometimes, and yeah, Star Wars has been there. Received many Star Wars action figures. You had a Star Wars iconic backpack.
I did.
Yeah. It's pervasive. You really can't get around Star Wars. It's, it was a part of the boom of franchises in the 70s, and my dad latched onto it. My mom's kind of like a Star Wars fan, but I got what they liked, right?
I'm a little confused about your dislike of Baby Yoda, or as we really know, Grogu, but I will let that slide for now.
It's not a dislike. Did I say dislike? I said I just never got it. Maybe I did say dislike. I don't know. You can roll back the tape if you want.
I think you said you weren't that big of a fan.
Okay, good. Okay.
Now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, I thought it'd be kind of fun to go through a visual analysis, and I will explain what that is in a moment, of each of these paintings. There's 4 paintings in the Thomas Kinkade Mandalorian series, and I figured we'd just kind of go through each one by one, kind of talk about what all the different elements are within them, describe them to our listeners who are not visually seeing this, and just kind of give our initial thoughts on them. To begin, visual analysis for Ryan. This is kind of a fun teaching moment for me. Also, as part of my background, I was an art teacher, very briefly. Visual analysis, definition of it is, it's a method of understanding art that focuses on an artwork's visual elements such as color, line, texture, things of that nature. In its strictest definition, it's a description and an explanation of visual structure for its own sake. So basically, it's a description of what we're actually looking at, and then maybe some type of interpretation of what it means or how we feel. Some things that we might consider are things like the line, the shape, the form, the colors that are in it, maybe how things are balanced, how things are contrasted, the proportion, the movement within the piece, and then just what do we think it means? Well, how does it make us feel? Stuff like that. So the first one I figured we'd take a look at is called Turning Point. All of these will have all of the information for them and linked in our description, as well as you'll be seeing them here on the screen. And these all came out in 2020. So I think kind of before maybe we go through what they actually said about the painting, we can talk a little bit about what we're personally seeing. The first thing that's really catching to me in looking at this painting is like the light. Like, you definitely could guess that there's somebody called Painter of Light whose hand would have been in this. Again, to note, Thomas Kinkade is dead. So these are interpretations of what maybe he would have been doing with this subject matter. Like, there's kind of maybe some interesting line with the shadows that are on the ground. Definitely like a use of like a subdued kind of color palette that we see in a lot of Thomas Kinkade paintings, of these purples and kind of like an orangey yellow. To me, I kind of feel like the colors and the shadows and stuff are kind of all like muddied together in a way, which I think is also kind of on par for a lot of his other paintings. What about you, Ryan?
Backtracking just slightly, just kind of a general thing I noticed for all the paintings that we're going to go through. None of them are that like Thomas Kinkade to me, if that makes sense. Like, they're kind of, I think they're all based on scenes from the show. So they're all just kind of more on the plain side, I would say. I mean, so Thomas Kinkade is already kind of plain, but these are like extra plain. They don't have like the Thomas Kinkade cottages or water visuals, or I'm not sure. They all just kind of seem like fine, regular pieces of art to me, if that makes sense. Like, just regular. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense.
And same with this one. Like, I mean, this is from the first episode, I think, or maybe the second episode.
I think it's the first one.
I mean, that pose there's not very much to say about it, right? Because I think that's pretty much almost identical to like the screen cap that we see. I kind of like the lighting in it. I'm honestly really not. I don't have anything negative really to say about this one. I honestly don't. I do like the lighting. I like the purples and the yellows. I think it's more bright than normal and more concentrated, more saturated than normal. In some Thomas Kinkade photos and puzzles that I've done. I mean, because that's like the sand outside and the light coming through. And I mean, even when I was watching The Mandalorian, and again, I wasn't sold from episode 1, this moment was kind of like striking, right? With the two reaching out to each other. I liked that moment, and you know, I like the way it's represented in this painting. I really don't have any gripes with it. I really don't.
Yeah. I definitely think this one is one of the better ones in this 4 painting series. I do think it's kind of funny how like the robot that he shot is just kind of like hidden within the other colors. So it's like there was some violence there that happened, but we can just kind of cover it up to kind of make it a little bit more palatable in this particular picture. They do include like some little notes about each painting, but they really just are describing like what happens in the actual scene leading up to this painting. So I don't think that they're particularly relevant, but if you are interested in seeing those other additional notes, you can check them out on the website that we will be linking down below. Let's go ahead and move on to our second painting. This is titled The Mud Horn. And again, this is from another moment, I believe. This one might be in episode 2 of The Mandalorian. All of these are from season 1, by the way. Again, here we have the same kind of like orangey yellows, some browns. I feel like there's some like attempt at texture, I would say, like on the background of this like dirt mountainy hill and the ground. But again, I kind of feel like it all gets kind of like muddled together in a way. Same with like the texture that is on this creature, the mud horn. Like, it's kind of hard to tell, like, is that his skin that has this texture? Is that fur? I don't really know what I'm looking at exactly with that. And it kind of, like, this to me, I feel like is almost just, like, kind of too blendy. Like, everything is just, like, too blended together. And I feel like this one, like, has, like, less contrast in the light as the first one did. And at least I feel like in the first one, the light contrast made it just like a little bit more exciting, whereas this one is more subdued. But I could see how maybe somebody would want something more subdued depending on where they're going to be like putting this in their home or their office or whatever.
I look at this and the texturing is unsettling. I know you said it's an attempt at texturing, but for me, the texturing is there and is unsettling to me. In the skin and how it closely resembles the mountains, how it closely resembles the ground. The sky is your classic Thomas Kinkade sky, like Jesus Christ could be going over the mountains, I don't know. I don't like how small and unnotable that the silhouettes of the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda are. I wish they were a little bit more pronounced, a little bit more in kind of what this photo is. I'm not sure if this is like, is the Mudhorn like a thing? Like, do people like this creature? Is it special? Do you know?
I don't think so. To me,
Okay.
at least, I feel like I've never seen anything like that. And the takeaway of this moment, like in the show to me, is not the emphasis on the Mudhorn. The emphasis would more so be on Baby Yoda or Grogu and what he's doing. So I agree that it's kind of weird that he's kind of like in the shadows.
Because, like, I mean, we all consume pop culture and memes, and I'm on Facebook, and, you know, all those TOs, they love The Mandalorian. And, I mean, I feel like I haven't seen anything that would, like, make this the subject matter of a painting, like, that they're trying to make money off of. I mean, maybe someone was really passionate about the Mudhorn, and there can be some applause there, like, way to go for making kind of an unconventional choice. I wish there were more colors. Like, I feel like it's really missing, I don't know, flowers, embellishments, and I know there's nothing there in that desert, but that desert on screen is beautiful. You look at it and the warm tones are lovely, but I'm not convinced here.
Something need to be more highly contrasted here, whether that be the light or the colors or the textures or something, because it all just kind of fades into one thing. I have bad vision, and if I were like standing away without my contacts or glasses, I kind of feel like it would just look like one thing there. I wouldn't be able to make any distinguished, like figure out what the distinguished parts are within it. Mm-hmm. Now we will move on to the Escort, our third painting in this
I'll go
series.
first.
Okay.
Let my untrained eye go first. This one's kind of actually the same one as the first one. This could literally be a screenshot taken from, I don't know, whatever, the first, second episode. And like, so I've been into Photoshop replicas lately, and they could have just Photoshop replicated it, right? They could have just digitally drawn over it with like a stylized brush and added in some contrast, some color choices, and that's what we would have here. Which again, like I'm fine with, right? Like I'm fine with looking at a scene that I like, and these are some pretty colors. I think they're pretty, and they are kind of a set together. This really matches with the first one. If you were to have them together, I think that would make sense. Just like the first one, it's kind of unremarkable to me, except at least in the first one, you kind of have the magic of that scene of Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian meeting for the first time. With this one, it's not as magical to me.
I feel like this is just like fine. Like it does, and I wonder if they probably did just do some type of like overlay of the actual scenes of the show. Here again, I feel like I could have used a little bit more contrast maybe in the colors and the lighting. Like you definitely see like a little bit around like the ship, like there's some like maybe some magical light like on the edges of the ship, but I think I would have liked it maybe to pop just like a little bit more, just since we have so much like purple going on in here and like the grays, maybe, or even just maybe more contrast in like the shadows on like the bottom of the ship as compared to the top of the ship. I think maybe I would have liked it if it did kind of try to incorporate some more of like the magicalness that you see in the first one with the other like Mandalorians that you see here providing their escort, just because, I don't know, I think it would just make it more exciting. I feel like it's just not very intriguing. Or I feel like I would have liked it if if it would have played up like the vague images of space that you can see in the background, like if we saw more of like a galaxy look versus it's very like subdued. So I think really I feel like with all of these I just always want like just more contrast, but it's very like palatable.
Yeah. Is it not palatable to you?
I mean it's fine. Like I said, like it's palatable, like I'd accept it, but I wouldn't personally want to own it or buy it or anything like that. But I wouldn't fault somebody necessarily for having it either. And now, last but not least, my favorite one in this series is titled Child's Play. And would you like to go first with this one also, Ryan?
Sure, I'll go first. So this one is the most Thomas Kinkade-esque to me. Like the grass looks like it could have been taken from any kind of Thomas Kinkade painting. Like the color palette in particular for the background. The Baby Yoda for me looks a little bit out of place. I was looking around at the website of Thomas Kinkade's website, and I was looking at the Marvel series, and I think that this is what most resembles in the Marvel series, because everyone, Spider-Man, whoever, looks just so out of place in the kind of Thomas Kinkade-ified city landscape. And I think Baby Yoda here also looks incredibly out of place to me. There's something about the color of his skin that I'm not sold on. Like the lines don't match for me. He just looks out of place. I do wish there was more light. Like if I were to buy this in a set, I think I would want this to match more of the first and the third paintings we were talking about, but it's a little bit out of place for me. I mean, the water is there, right? The signature Thomas Kinkade water, the lily pads, and even like the little hutches in the background are perfectly Thomas Kinkade-ified for me, but not the Baby Yoda.
Well, the first thing that I noticed with this is just how unsettling the child is to look at. It's some type of combining of trying to make him look realistic, but also like cutesy that is just kind of unsettling to me. I think something about like the eyes, and I feel like personally, like I do have an affinity for things that are like very kitsch because I think that they're fun. If I were to personally buy one of these paintings, I think I'd probably buy this one just because I feel like this has more of that over the top like kitsch look, just because of how they depicted Grogu. I think it just looks really silly. But it definitely, like you said, has all of the Thomas Kinkade elements. Like even in the far background, you can see pine trees that are almost reminiscent of like Christmas trees maybe. And the little huts, they look very much like cottages. It has, again, like a very like almost monochromatic color palette where it has all of these light greens and blue tones, very earthy, but again, not very high contrast, kind of similar to you. I think I would have liked there to be more of that light element coming in somewhere just to make it all a little bit more magical. To me, this one, again, it's my favorite just because I feel like it's like the most like ridiculous basically to look at.
Is there any kind of final notes on all the pieces before we move on? I mean, for me, I wouldn't buy the set. They don't go together. I'm really not convinced that they do. I mean, I wouldn't buy any of them.
I agree. I don't think that they really go together at all. The only like person I could really imagine buying this would be like some dad who's like really into the Mandalorian and doesn't know how to look for things like this elsewhere, so he just buys it on a trip to Disneyland or something like that. I don't think that they really go together. I could see maybe this one tying in more closely to the first and the third one because there is like some slight purple in this picture, And the textures are just like a little bit more defined in this one. But that one with the mud horn, it just like, I feel like it just doesn't go really with anything else. So with that being said, figured we kind of go into a question that I had, which was, why does this even need to exist in the first place? Why do these Mandalorian paintings need to be here? My first initial thought for that was because the concept art of the Mandalorian itself, which you see at the end of each episode during like the credits, they have images of the concept art in there, and it looks really cool. I have seen so many people like be really into that and wanting to get like prints of those artworks, and I just think it's like so interesting that it's like, why even go the extra step of putting in maybe these like overlay of brushes and things like that in Photoshop to Thomas Kinkadeify them.
I mean, the obvious reason is the right reason. Probably it's money, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really it.
No, I mean, obviously that's the reason. It's just so they can make more money. I guess just personally, I'm like, there's already something so great in the world. Like, why do we have to make anything more than that? There's even a book. There's several books on the concept art of Star Wars, and there's one in particular of season 1 that has these images from the paintings. Also, just like we kind of mentioned already, the show itself, like the cinematography, I feel like was really great. All of the imagery in it was really beautiful. I remember when I first started watching it, like I was very like shocked almost by the quality. Like it felt like I was watching a movie quality on something that I was streaming. So it almost feels like these paintings do like a disservice to all of that is on the original show, and just to have them like juxtaposed next to one another, it just makes them that much further apart. Like knowing what the actual show looked like and the concept art looked like, to me, it just made the paintings like that much worse to look at.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Back to money. Disney wants the monopoly, right, on all art, and I mean the concept art is beautiful, the screen grabs are great, but any kind of stylized rendition, they're like, look at us, we have the official Thomas Kinkade renditions, and so people want their version of fan art to be more reputable in their mind. This is that option for them, and so I think it's just a way to cover their market bases, and this is what they have to offer.
Yeah, well, interestingly, it's not all they have to offer. If you go to Disney Art on Main Street's website, like their stores where they sell their artwork, they have other alternatives that are also like not bad. Like they have some kind of like comic book cover-esque prints of different moments in the show that highlight the characters of the show. And those are really cool too. So they definitely have options, and you can buy prints of the concept art. So it definitely seems like they're trying to just cover all their bases that they possibly can, which again makes sense, just so they can make the most money. It just kind of feels like you just don't need them all.
Yeah.
But I mean, options are always good.
I'm sure there's people who like go to Disneyland and they're like, oh, it's tradition. I gotta buy my one thing from the Thomas Kinkade store. I'm sure several of those people exist out there. Just like, I'm trying to think here. Like, it's tradition to buy something from somewhere. I feel like I have that thing. I just can't think of it right now. But that would not surprise me if that person existed. And so, I mean, they're just trying to make the stars align for everyone, you know? And they already have, I assume, a contract, right, with Thomas Kinkade Studios. So, don't want to waste it. Again, this is not as atrocious as the Marvel renditions. You guys can go look at it on the website. This is tame.
Also, as a side note, I try to think of something that you always buy when you go someplace, and the only thing I could think of were those like frozen oranges at the Renaissance Festival.
Yeah, I always buy that, and a pickle.
Yeah. Oh. Anyways, moving on, kind of a little bit what we just were talking about. Another question that I have is, why does Disney affiliate themselves with Thomas Kinkade in the first place? my gut reaction of why that is just because Thomas Kinkade already has this kind of aesthetic and style going for him that lends himself to kind of like picturesque Christian themes that kind of like are comfortable with like the American dream, like all things that are very tame, things that are like themes that are very much accepted by Disney and their stories and kind of their brand that they put out there. It makes sense to me why they would align themselves with him, albeit there's things about him that he has done that we've kind of mentioned and can go into more detail about, that just him as a problematic figure. I wonder why they would still choose to associate themselves with him.
I don't think it's widely known Thomas Kinkade as a figure in his history. So again, only recently I was made aware that he is the person that he is. And I mean, again, I could make those assumptions from his stories, from his style, but I just don't think it's like common knowledge. You know what I mean? Like, at least not out of the art community. And the art community is not accessible. At least from my opinion, right? From my standing, it's not accessible as some other communities are. So it's just not common knowledge. And so as long as Disney can keep getting by with a famous name and what they're doing, they're gonna keep doing it, you know?
I will also note that I tried to do some research into what actually, like, what the contracts are, when the contracts started between Thomas Kinkade Studios and Disney, and really what the relationship was, but I couldn't really find anything online to give me any information about when that started or why or anything, which I found a little peculiar, that there wouldn't be anything about that. The closest I could see was just like on Thomas Kinkade's Wikipedia, like it notes that he was contracted for like the 50th anniversary of Disney and like subsequent anniversaries of the parks and things like that, but really no information on actually when or why or how these people or institutions came together to create their work. I think just a little bit more background about how Thomas Kinkade was problematic, just for people who don't know, because also similarly to you, I didn't actually know any of that either. I just didn't like his paintings. I didn't know any of his business practices or other allegations that he's had against him. One of the main issues that he's had, and feel free to jump in, Ryan, if you'd like to talk about this a little bit more, but he has been or was accused of unfair dealings with the owners of the franchises of his galleries, meaning they had galleries that were owned as franchises by individual people selling his artwork, and these have been taken to court, and I think there's subsequently been issues of not having the money to pay the people who lost out and felt like they were told information that they would like make back certain amounts of money and investments, and they didn't end up making any of that money back.
Yeah, and some people were basically, I don't know if this is the correct word, blackmailed, but saying like, you're going to be selling like the painter of light's paintings, like God's paintings, right? Like, do you believe that you are Christian enough to be a part of this project? You know, that's not good.
And I believe they also use that as a tactic to sell the paintings to people in the stores, like to very specifically market them to Christians and kind of take advantage of that in multiple ways, almost akin to like an MLM situation of both selling paintings and Christianity all in one. Definitely some shady business practices there.
What is the deal? I don't really know. Maybe you know, but like marketing it with like the accent, like no Thomas Kinkade painting that you get from the store is the same, right? Because there's something added to it by the person who runs the franchise. Like, what is the deal with that?
My understanding is that there wasn't actually very much of that, which has been an issue also, because, yeah, my understanding was that before that he did some of that of, like, trying to make things, like, individualized in some way, but the majority of everything and even, like, the top collected pieces are all mass marketed or made by other people in more of like an industrial type situation.
Gotcha. I mean, I think in the stores they did, like, while you were there, embellish the painting if you bought it from the store. But probably not online. But yeah, if you go into the store and you buy a Thomas Kinkade, you do get it embellished on the spot. So that gives you that sense of, I have an original, right? It's not just a print. It's like the real deal, you know?
I'm also not sure how that would have translated, because pre-internet, I'm pretty sure like the majority of his work was sold via like mail order and catalog. So I don't think I would assume that probably didn't happen to the extent that people thought that it would, especially from what I've read on Wikipedia, being that it sounds like it basically just is like an industrial printed type thing that people are getting. It's not as unique maybe as they're being sold that it would be. Along these lines of other issues that he's had, he was known alcoholic. Not that made him a bad person. It was more so just some of the incidences that occurred while that was happening. He was known for like yelling during performances. He heckled Siegfried and Roy in Vegas once. Again, he urinated on a Winnie the Pooh statue, which I would have thought that when that happened, that would have been like the time that Disney would be like, okay, we're not going to associate someone who's going to pee on one of our most beloved mascots. But I don't know. I would have loved to have known what those conversations were had after that happened. But yeah, he was convicted of a DUI. He was just like known for being like just like agitating people and cursing at people, different things like that. And again, he also has been alleged of like groping women, which is terrible. And really like all these things kind of led me to like a question of like, how does Disney decide like who stays and who goes as far as like who they're choosing to affiliate themselves with? Like, I feel like I can't think of anybody prior to like the past maybe 3 years that like I know that Disney dropped for doing something problematic in the media that was known about. It hasn't been until more so recently that they have decided to start cutting ties with people. Like, I know that this is gonna maybe make some people upset for me to mention this, but like they did recently cut ties with Johnny Depp. So I just wonder like how do they decide who stays and who goes? Basically.
I mean, now this is the late Thomas Kinkade. I don't know if anything's gonna come of this right now in our current climate since he's dead. I don't see that changing for the foreseeable future. And I mean, 2012, 10 years ago, like it was a different world back then. Like just not as much information spread. And I don't think it's like if there's no like uprising, right, just from the people of the internet and our cancel culture that latches onto Thomas Kinkade, I don't see him going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't really either. And like I said, I feel like that's not even something that's really been in conversation until recently as the rise of cancel culture has happened. I do wonder though if maybe eventually they would choose to distance themselves from Thomas Kinkade, if maybe they had to distance themselves from somebody else who did similar things, something like that. I don't know. I just think it's kind of interesting.
Even the articles that I was reading, they were all from like 2012, 2013, like the King of Kitsch is dead, you know, like they were all postmortems of his artwork and the person. There hasn't really been anything that, at least that I've seen from the top 20 Google results, that not very much stuff has been written or done about him or thought of in 2020.
To be honest, I'm not sure how many people really even care or would care about like most of these things anyways, or even give it really a second thought apart from just like your own personal taste of disliking the paintings. And
I mean, from what I understand, he's an anomaly, right? Like his fame and fortune during being alive and like the type of paintings that he was doing, like that's weird, right? Is that not an anomaly? Is that not like a miracle?
That definitely is a miracle, and I think a really great segue into what I want to talk about next, which is really like how mass marketed his artwork is. And according to Thomas Kinkade's company, 1 in every 20 American homes owns a copy of one of his paintings. Which, if that's true, that's pretty crazy. Like, I don't know if I really believe that statistic, but if that is true, like, I don't think that would be true of like any other artist in history, probably.
Where is he getting this? Does he have a question on the U.S. Census that I don't know about? Maybe there's enough paintings that have been bought where there's a painting in 1 in every 20 U.S. households, but I do not think in the neighborhood that I live in that more than 5 people have Thomas Kinkade paintings in their households.
Wait, I would dispute that. I would believe that more people in your neighborhood would have one in their household.
Ooh, I don't know.
But when I read that, I just thought that was crazy, and I don't really believe it, but who knows? I mean, maybe they're including every single thing, like every little mouse pad and little like statue of Aladdin.
Puzzle. I mean, if puzzle is the case, then I definitely lived in a household with several Thomas Kinkade paintings.
Yeah. I think it probably will include puzzles since it just says a copy of his paintings. A copy could be anything.
Be anything.
He's also reportedly one of the most counterfeited artists of all time, due large in part to advances in like how affordable, how people can make like high resolution digital prints of things. Also, supposedly there was like some crazy statistic of how many paintings he would have in Asia, I believe. According to his studio, they say that he's the most collected artist in Asia, but they say that that's because of counterfeited paintings, which I don't know if it counts as being the most collected if it's not even yours, if it's just a fake of yours. But then they also say that they haven't gotten any money from that, even though they've been the most collected in Asia because of the black market of Thomas Kinkade works.
I see.
So just lots of allegations of how many paintings and how popular they are. But I think there really is like no denying that it definitely is prevalent in everyday culture, at least here in the United States. Probably most people, I would assume, even if they don't know who he is, they've probably seen one of his paintings somewhere that they've been before. Part of how like he has been able to be so successful, I think, is how he's really just like marketed, or how he marketed himself and made this like semi-industrial process in which he could use machinery and lower level people to really like just pump out as much of his artwork as possible, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, especially if we're trying to think about like the accessibility of artwork. I don't think it's bad to have prints. I have prints of actual artworks behind me, so clearly I don't have a problem with that. It's an interesting model, or like how he chose to use platforms like QVC to sell his artwork. So I don't know. Some people have thought that that's been like a detriment to art, that it has like caused people to have like a misunderstanding of what contemporary art is. I would argue that that might be seen as gatekeeping to contemporary art.
I don't know. I don't think he should be hated upon for his marketing, except that I feel like he manipulated people using populist rhetoric to get them to buy their paintings, to open up his stores, and that's something that I definitely want to maybe tap into a little bit later. So other than the unmoral business practices, I like if someone were to take a similar approach and do the same thing. I mean, like, I don't know how disputable like Andy Warhol is, right? And all of his prints. I mean, Lego is doing a print of his. T-shirts everywhere, Forever 21. I feel like go to Walmart and buy an Andy Warhol print. I don't think that's wrong. I don't know anything about Andy Warhol, and I don't want to get into that because I'm not knowledgeable, but maybe you can tell me if he is also scorned in the art world.
Well, it depends on who you talk to. That was actually what I was kind of thinking before you even said that. Kind of liking it to Andy Warhol as being a figure that is generally more accepted by the contemporary art world, who basically has done the same thing. There's other artists that I could think of who are also like pretty mass marketed. But Andy Warhol, I think, is probably like the biggest one. And it's kind of like a mixed bag. Like, I think that, at least personally, I think that his work at least has like more substance to what it is. It's not just like a pretty picture. There is maybe some idea there behind what it's about. But I mean, he is like, you can buy Andy Warhol literally anything: socks, backpacks, t-shirts, anything you want. And I think a lot of the art world is okay with that. I'm pretty sure I have an Andy Warhol magnet somewhere in this room right now. Personally, for me, like, there was a very large Andy Warhol exhibition at the Whitney Museum a couple years ago that I went to that received a lot of praise. And to me, when I was there, I just kind of felt like, oh, well, why do we need another Andy Warhol exhibition right now? Like, especially for an institution like the Whitney, who attempts to make, like, showcase political work, albeit their own political practices are typically garbage. They are uplifting somebody like Andy Warhol. But also, a lot of this, as always, I think comes back to money. There's the Andy Warhol Foundation, which funds, like, maybe almost all art projects in the United States. I mean, obviously that's an overstatement, but I guarantee you most museums that you go to, or galleries, or like, I've received a grant before that got money from the Andy Warhol Foundation. They give so much money to everything, so people are probably just a little bit nicer in general because of that, because they get so much money from him. But I think that it's a very fair comparison to put them together, because really, if you look at what has happened to them and their artwork after their death, it's basically the same thing. And also, it should be noted that Andy Warhol wasn't a great person either. So it's like, really, there's more similarities than you would think.
Is Andy Warhol considered kitsch? Is his artwork considered kitsch?
I don't think so. If anything, I feel like maybe people might consider his artwork like campy and kitsch in a fun way. Parts of it. I guess it would depend. Like, if it's like this magnet that I have of soup can, this is probably considered kitsch. If I had an actual print of his artwork in a frame, maybe somebody would say that's not kitsch. I don't know. It all, I think, is kind of nonsense to me.
Yeah, it's a little bit hogwash, buck wild, that Thomas Kinkade is just so hated upon just because his artwork is it's right-winged. It follows the idealism of the American dream of Christianity, and I mean, it's not nothing. It's not nothing. To me, it seemed a bit hypocritical when I was reading everything. And again, very low-level understanding of how the art world works and what counts as art and what doesn't. All I know is that Lady Gaga tells me if I be myself, then I am art. And it seems like Thomas Kinkade was doing that. And what he was painting, he probably believed, you know?
Yeah, I think it really just all comes down to a level of gatekeeping and saying, we don't want to let these people who can afford to maybe buy something that is $100, less than $100, we don't want to let them think that they're a part of us, because we only like, in the contemporary art world, to promote artists who are selling works for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we need to make a distinction between us and them, which I think is nonsense. Because if your only introduction to art is like some shitty print of Andy Warhol, or some mass-produced image of Frida Kahlo, or even a picture, like a Thomas Kinkade painting, I think that's great. I think everybody should have access to some type of visual artwork to engage with, because that definitely makes a difference in somebody's life, whether or not it's something that is valued at like a high market level or not.
And that kind of brings us around to Thomas Kinkade's populist platform. So I want to just define populist real quick, and it's just an individual or belief that is taking, they're kind of like individualizing the ideas of the masses and putting it on themselves. So Barack Obama has been called a populist for his, I can't think of the word, revelatory. That's not what I'm trying to think of. But healthcare for all is considered populist. Bernie Sanders, McCarthyism, there's good and bad spectrums at the end of populism. So, and Thomas Kinkade definitely used that rhetoric to say that I'm one of you. Like, I grew up in a small town, and, you know, I just had I was an apprentice, and I worked my way through the ranks, and now I'm selling my art to you at a good rate. And not only that, it's customized, and, you know, we don't need to support anyone else in the art world because you have me, and I'm your buddy, right? Like, I'm here to let you have access to the art world, and it's Christian over here, you know? Like, it's great. It's I'm a painter of God, and I'm just like you. And people can buy into that and support him and feel like they're supporting themselves, like someone that came from where they could come from, you know?
I think it's interesting because there isn't really a market for that within other art spaces, I would say. Like, it is very unusual, if not, I don't even know if I've ever seen any, like, really Christian or right-leaning artwork that wasn't, like, old or antiquity from, like, the Renaissance era or something, like, that's talking about Christianity in that way. There isn't really a space, or even a space for any type of, like, conservative artwork, except for some people that I'm not sure that we want to discuss during this podcast. Yeah, I feel like that's something kind of similarly with Andy Warhol. I think that was part of his appeal, is that he did kind of have, like, more of a traditional upbringing, or just like a normal everyday person upbringing in, like, Pittsburgh, and people probably identified with something like that. There isn't very much of a space for that in the art world. So I definitely think he was smart to capitalize on that, and I think that helped projected him to his fame and marketability. But I wonder what it would be like if there was almost like another side in the art world, and how they would compete together. Like, if we're thinking about it like political parties, like Democrats and Republicans, like if there was really both of that space in the art world, because I've never seen it before.
Yeah, no, I think that could happen. Just the way that rhetoric is, it is kind of manipulative in a way, to say that I'm just like you when you're not, right? And both left and right politically have used it, and it's very, very strange to me. I'm trying to think in the music community as well, like the music industry, how that rhetoric has been used, but I don't know, it's just very lucrative talk.
Since I'm trying to think of maybe an example of somebody in the music industry also. I feel like there's definitely attempts at that, and like documentaries. Like, I feel like maybe there was an attempt at that in Lady Gaga's 5'2", is that what it was called? But it very clearly was not. That she was not like everybody else. Yeah, I don't know. It is interesting to see how people try to use something like that to their advantage.
Mm-hmm. But it's definitely more common in the political world, or at least we see it more blatantly and kind of as propaganda in the political world. Maybe not so much in the art industry, because it seems more authentic, right? Like, it really does seem authentic, and a lot of the times it probably is authentic. I mean, Thomas Kinkade did come from a little small Christian family, like, of middle class. I mean,
yeah.
It's not relatable to everyone, but, you know.
Yeah. If anything, I feel like in the art world, it's more so like, how can you best sell your trauma to people? Mm-hmm. And that is how you can be relatable to others, is how they can relate their trauma to yours, which I think is a whole other potentially problematic issue.
One final thing I wanted to bring up as well is Thomas Kinkade has been called the George W. Bush of the art world. And I really like that idea, right? That Thomas Kinkade is just so nothing, just so pointless, that he's been likened to George W. Bush. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's funny because George W. Bush has dabbled into painting now. And I feel like his paintings could be arguably more interesting and better stylistically than Thomas Kinkade's paintings. So it's definitely amusing to me to hear that as an insult.
Well, it's more to his presidency, right?
Yeah. No, yeah.
Not his art. But kudos to George W. Bush for painting veterans and using that as art therapy. Kudos.
Yes. No, yeah. I think I guess it's kind of unfair because Thomas Kinkade didn't necessarily do nothing. He definitely did. We have seen now what could happen if you do market yourself in that way. So he didn't do nothing. He has shown how you can be successful in a particular way, whether or not that particular way is accepted by others.
I think it's more of the nothingness of what his art stands for, that it just represents idealism and that it's just lovely paintings and it just doesn't make you think. Kind of like Friends, and how Friends has been getting a lot of backlash for being a nothing show, and it should have used its platform to say more controversial things and whatnot. It's kind of like that in retrospective. It's nothing. Art is saying nothing. Again, I'm not sure if that's true. Is saying nothing saying something? Is it bad to revel in nothingness and to just veg and enjoy a pretty picture or enjoy Friends? That's a whole different conversation, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of the main critique of his kind of kitsch.
No, I definitely think it's complicated because on the one hand, I feel like it is, like, there's definitely, like, a place for just being able to relax or veg out while watching something like Friends, or just having a simple painting in your home of Thomas Kinkade that you just think is nice to look at aesthetically. I guess then you really have to look at, like, dig deeper and see what's really going on. Like, are you sure that they're not actually pushing some other type of narrative there? What are the, like, implications of giving them your money? Like, because it seems like almost always there's, like, there really isn't nothing. There is something often, whether it be nefarious or good, but I don't know. It is.
I don't know. It seems like we end a lot of our segments with complicated questions that we're unable to answer. So I hope that everyone who's watching or listening is thinking about it.
All right. And one last thing that I just wanted to mention that I thought was interesting. I wanted to do kind of like a deep dive on my own personal research about how it is that Disney handles issues of copyright infringement, because me personally, if I'm going to buy like fan art of something, like some examples that I have behind me of Star Wars fan art, I would personally rather buy that from an independent artist who is making work that I just think looks better or fits my personal aesthetic. So I was kind of curious about how they handle that, and there's actually like no real definitive answers. I found this really great article written by the Mouselet, I believe it's called. I'll link it down below. But they did like tons of research basically for independent artists to follow. And it seems like Disney basically has very like minute ways of having the copyright be very strong on like all of their intellectual property basically. So they can basically like come after anybody who ever reproduces any of their work, unless it's something that is old, such as like Alice in Wonderland. That was a story that existed prior to Disney, and there is imagery from Alice in Wonderland that's in the public domain now that Disney doesn't have control over. But something like the original Mickey Mouse, his copyright should have expired by now, but they have extended it so it is not in the public domain. And it seems really like Disney just kind of picks and chooses who it is that they go after. Like, they have shut down Etsy shops that have made like less than 5,000 sales before. there's other people that they just let keep like going and going and going. And it really seems like it all just comes down to how, if they view it as them like losing out on money in some way or something that they could market themselves, which I think really just ties back kind of full circle to our thoughts on, or why it is that they would choose to make Thomas Kinkade artwork in the first place, even though they have all this other stuff that you could buy alternatively. It seems like really it just comes down to they just want all of your money to go to them no matter what.
Yeah, it really does seem like there should be better alternatives to handle that in our current state of like of people wanting to be creative and wanting to like support franchises that they like and that they want to make art of. I don't understand why there's not a better way to do it. Why Disney can't have commission or something like that if they could resolve it a different way and not just shut it down completely. I don't know why. It's the same with everyone, right? Disney's not the only one who's guilty of this. And I understand why. Do they need all that money? Do they need to be as harsh as they do? No. But I'm a little bit more like lenient and understanding when it comes to that, when it comes to the copyright. But I do think that copyright laws are outdated and they should be reevaluated for the modern times.
Agreed. So on that note, I think that we will end this episode of Prickly Pear Primas. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us this week.
I hope you look at a Thomas Kinkade puzzle in Barnes & Noble differently.
Yes, or the next time you go to the dentist's office, if you see one hanging up on the wall, maybe you could think of your own critiques in your mind. So thank you so much for joining us. Please like and subscribe our video. Feel free to leave us a comment down below on any ideas for future upcoming podcasts.
Bye!